Hey guys, Tarke Cat here. We're going to be doing something kind of different today. So I was in the middle of actually recording another video when one of my guildies said, quick, we need someone to tank Heroic Gorefiend. So I very quickly just went in there, hit record, did the fight. Now this is a very sloppy kill, but this is the perfect example, and I will talk through how the fight went and what to do, of how to tank this fight, especially in uncoordinated groups. Now before I start playing the video, I'm going to very briefly cover the fight for anyone who doesn't know it. So, as a tank, and I'll cover all the tactics very basically, but as a tank, their main thing for you to worry about is basically ads. This is a ad fight for everyone's concern. So, this big scary fellow we have here is Gorefiend, and Gorefiend, as you may have noticed, has kind of an issue with his stomach. The way that this fight works is there are two phases and two rooms. This is the main room, or I will refer to it as the main room, and then there is the stomach room. If you die in the main room, he steals your soul and you go inside his stomach. It's basically a copy of this room with a giant well in the middle. If you walk into the giant well in the middle, you leave the stomach room, you re-enter the main room. So kind of like soul room, main room. Might be a bit complicated, but the second you see it, you'll kind of get an idea of how it kind of all works. Now, throughout the fight, he will debuff players with a move which just forces you to die, and you go into the stomach room. Now, the way that will work is whichever tank starts tanking Gorefiend will get the debuff. So usually what will happen is tanks will say, do you want to start on Gorefiend, or will I start on Gorefiend? You have a bit of back and forth, and then your strat kind of all centers around that. So in this case, the other tank started the fight. So he gets a mark, you'll see it pop up on my screen, it says taunt him, the other guy's got the mark. He gets teleported inside the stomach. Inside the stomach as a tank, you basically just wait for the Gorebound spirit to spawn. The way you can tell it's a Gorebound spirit, it's the giant hulking orc, which kind of looks a bit like the Hulk. Basically look for the big roidy guy, rather than the Dranite and the skeletons, which are the DPS and the healing ads, respectively. When you're inside the stomach, basically what the Gorefiend will do is he will pound the floor. It leaves a nasty AoE. Basically just walk out of it and you're fine. DPS him to 60% health and he leaves the room. He has a move called Bellowing Shout, which is something which has to be interrupted, otherwise it does big nasty AoE damage. So interrupt him, don't stand on the stuff on the floor, you chill. If you're in a coordinated group or using any kind of voice comms, it's very handy for the other tanks and for the healers especially, for you to call out the health. Say, the Gore-bound spirit is about to die, get ready, or I'm coming out. There are two ways that tanks usually do this. Usually what you will do, or what my guild does at least, is one guy starts the fight, he goes into the spirit. When the Gorebound runs into the well, he leaves, the tank follows him out. The tank who followed him out then picks up the boss. The off tank then turns onto the ad. The reason we do it that way is just because of the tanks that we run. I'm a Death Knight and my other guild tank is a warrior. I have slightly higher damage than him, so having me being able to just sit on the boss means we get more DPS. So him going into the stomach early on is just more beneficial for the raid. Also, because I have AMS, which is anti-magic shell, very powerful ability, I can just sit on the ad no problem. So the way, that's just how we've done it. Sometimes you get the one tank who just likes to do everything, and what he does is he starts the fight, he goes into the stomach, he takes the ad, when he leaves he takes the ad again, and the other guy just AFKs on the boss. There's nothing really wrong with either strat. A lot of it will depend on your comp, what your healers are, if you're doing it on normal, heroic or mythic, but you know, this is just a very basic heroic pug walkthrough. So that's kind of that. I'll briefly cover the two other kinds of ads that spawn throughout this fight. There are Draenei casters, which they spawn inside the stomach, and the way that you kill them is that healers, much like the tanks, will get dragged into the stomach. And if they heal the Draenei casters inside the stomach, it actually deals damage to them. If they heal or damage them to full, they die. Otherwise, they will walk to the well, and they join the main room, and they cast, and then, you know, DPS needs to kill them. The DPS ad is a skeleton, it's called a Skeletal Construct, and much the same, they slowly walk to the middle of the room. When they hit the middle of the room, they join the main room. DPS them down, pretty bog standard. Any ad which joins the main room from the soul room is the priority for all DPS. There should never be DPS just sat on the boss all day. There will be DPS sat on the boss all day because people like to pass their numbers. But that's kind of that. So if you're a DPS and you're watching this, then why are you watching a tanking guide? But no, just worry about the ads and that's that. So that's kind of like phase 1 in a nutshell. You just go through that. One thing I will say is phase 1 usually lasts for about 3 minutes. Then you get a feast phase. The way that feast phase works is Gorefiend stops summoning ads. Everyone leaves his stomach. And he does an animation which looks kind of like this. You stack up in front of the boss. So you stack up where the statue is, right in front here. There's usually a healing rain there. You just stack in the healing rain. And he takes 200% increased damage. So this is where you save all your big juicy damage cooldowns, obviously. And you just DPS the boss. This is very much a ad fight, so as long as you kill all the ads in phase 1 and you survive to the feast, you're going to kill them in the feast phases. Usually, depending on how good your group is, you'll kill them in 2 to 3 feasts, and again, these happen every 3 minutes from one another. As a tank, there is one mechanic you do need to worry about in the feast. There are these spirits or wisps, wispy things that spawn. They spawn at the edges of the room, and they can spawn all the way around the edge of the room, and they slowly travel to Gorefiend directly. If they touch a player, they will do AoE damage, and if they get close to Gorefiend, it actually shortens the length of his feast. So what you do is you get either 1 or 2 tanks, depending on how coordinated you are and what tanks you run, and they run around the edge of the room like a headless chicken, and they just run into all of the spirits. Things to note is Death Knights can use AMS to get runic power off them. Warriors are very good for this because they can intervene and leap and charge all over the place. For my guild, the way we do it is, again, as I have high DPS than him, is I just sit on the boss all day, and he just solo worries about everything, and if he can't reach one because it's on the wrong side of the room, he just screams, Tarke, go grab that one on the right, I walk over and pick it up on the right. Really simple. So you go through all of that, and then you go back into phase 1, which is dealing with the ads. There will only ever be 1 Gorebound spirit per ad phase, or feast phase, depending on what you want to call it. So as a tank, really that's all you need to worry about. Whichever tank ends up on the Gorebound Spirit, that's the big hulking dude, you will want to use your defensives, as that is the only time during this entire fight you need to use defensives. One thing I will say when it comes to the way you use your defensives also, is what happens is he hits you really hard, he has his interrupting move, Bellowing Shout, and then he has this thing called like Fell Touched Magic. Basically every time he hits you, you take an increasing dot. Do not press your defensives right away. The way I like to handle him as a Death Knight is when I first start tanking him, I will use 1 rune tap. That's my like soft active mitigation. I use 1 rune tap just to soften the initial blow. I then wait until I've gained a few stacks, then I pop AMS, then I pop Icebound Fortitude, and I stagger them all out a bit, and I'll also do a Vampiric Blood for the extra healing. Now, the reason why I sort of stagger them out and I pop them kind of later rather than earlier is twofold. Usually what will happen, especially if you're in a good guild or just in a good group, is all of the DPS go on this ad and the ad dies incredibly quickly. You'll still get quite a lot of the dot on you, and what healers like to do is they go, ooh, ad is up. They all heal the tank. They just spam their heals. The second that ad dies, they stop healing that tank. You've still got this really nasty dot on you. So if you pop everything really early, the ad dies, your defensives wear off, you've still got like 4 or 5 stacks of this dot, and you very quickly die in like 2 ticks. And the healer's like, oh, I don't know. So what I like to do is I like to wait a few seconds, then do it. That way my defensive will usually last through the entirety of the dot. And I've never died, since I've started doing that. Even in good groups, especially this late, you probably won't die ever, regardless of when you pop your defensives. But if you're in progression or very uncoordinated groups, you do a lot of pugging. That's something I really recommend, because that was something which used to get me a lot when my guild very much started raiding. So that's basically everything. I'm now going to play through this recording, and we can just sort of go through stuff as it comes. So there'll be a little bit of build up because this is just for the thing. You can see everyone's buffing up. You can see the 2 Blingtrongs in the background chilling, and we'll just talk through the plays on a step-by-step basis. So again, the important thing to remember, and this is one other thing that I did actually forget, is that melee have another mechanic they need to worry about. Basically, if you're stood within 5 yards of other players, it does damage. So if you have an add-on like Bigwigs or DBM, it's very, very handy. You can see I'm telling people like where they need to stand and stuff. I'm pointing, because it was a pug. But you can just get a range checker, and you just make sure you're always outside of 5 yards from one another. Again, remember, I haven't played in like 2 weeks before this, so my rotation's completely screwed. I do a few really weird plays. At one point, I was like saving runes to get an optimal file, and it was just like, why are you doing that? So I'm just going to jump ahead to the timer. Now, the other tank in this case is the one starting it. So all I really need to worry about is popping my Army of the Dead at 8 seconds. The reason why I pop it at 8 seconds is that way all of my runes, and you can see my runes here, they will fully regenerate by the time we get to 1. See? It's just the right time. So that's just a little tip for Death Knights and pull timers. Here you can see my range thing. I always like to, as a tank, I like to be more in the middle than the outer edge, because healers generally can't heal you. If you're right in the middle, they usually can't heal you. Here you see Shadow of Death. That was the debuff I was talking about. Because the other tank started, he got the debuff. Really, really straightforward. So yeah, one thing is you can see all these DPS here. This is a pug. They don't know what a 5-yard range is. They're all still on top of each other. So they're causing a lot of extra unnecessary damage for the healers, which, but whatever. Here you can see those skeletal constructs I was talking about. And as you can see, they slowly fixate towards a player. If they reach that player, it explodes big damage. Now, the Gorebound Spirit's about to come out now. So I always turn, I'm looking, it spawns right in front of me, which is great. So I pick it up. You can see I haven't popped any of my defensives yet. I'm waiting. And then I'll start to pop them in just a second. Now, the other tank, because this was a pug, he takes it off me. And we do like a weird tanking dance where he takes it off me. Then I've got Gorefiend the whole way. It's really awkward, but this is a very uncoordinated, tanking-wise, this was very uncoordinated, and it was a really smooth run. One thing I really want to stress right now is if you are new to tanking, do not wait until Legion. Start tanking now. There's absolutely no reason not to. A lot of people I know, towards the end of an expansion, they decide they want to try out raiding. They go, oh, I'll wait until the new expansion comes out. I'll just, focus on getting some gear, level up some characters. No, do it now. A lot of guilds are missing roles because people are going on breaks or they want to get their 13 out of 13 Mythic. Now is the time, especially with the way that Mythic Dungeons are just giving out free gear. If you haven't started raiding, start raiding now. This is a complete pug. I've got one person from my guild who's on a completely fresh character, and it's fine. If we can do it, you can do it easily. So back to the fight. As you can see, the feast is coming. It's very important to make sure you clear all of the ads before the feast. All these DPS, like, we don't give a shit about ads. Right, those are the wisp things I was talking about. This one was caught a bit late, as, again, the other tank is a very coordinated. You can see here, though, that he's like, oh, I'm on it. I need to cover the wisp, so it's pretty cool. If you're going to have both tanks doing this, the best way of doing it is you say one of you goes left, the other one goes right, and we kind of naturally did this ourselves here. We both go for a bit of cheeky damage here because, Feast of Souls is up. I then come out to cover these, he comes out to cover the other two. Really nice little synergy. Death Knights are particularly bad because we don't have any movement buffs for this. So if you're in a guild and you have basically any other tanking class, except for maybe a Paladin, get those to do the Wisp entirely and you just sit on the boss. Paladins and Death Knights, they don't really have any good burst mobility. I guess Paladins do have the burst of speed talent if they want to take it. Monks obviously can roll around everywhere. Warriors can leap and charge everywhere. And then Druids, they have a plethora of speed buffs. So here I tuck myself into the edge again because I'm not wanting to take the extra damage. Again, in a coordinated group, it's much better that you have your DPS off to the edges and your tanks in the middle. That way it's easier for healers on the edges of the room to heal. One other mechanic I did miss out, which you sort of saw there, was there's a tether mechanic, which will target the DPS and the healers. As a tank, you don't need to worry about it at all. Basically, what will happen is one player will get picked, there'll be 2 tethers on them, and you need to run to them. If you do not run to them, you'll kill them. these things around the edges of the room with a touch of doom. Again, it's a healer DPS mechanic. As a tank, you do not need to worry about it, just don't stand in it. They'll get a debuff, you'll see it gets called out every now and again on my DBM. They get it, they need to run to the edge of the room. That's that. So again, you see Gorebound Spirit. The second one's about to spawn, I already start shuffling around the room. I'm trying to work out where it's going to spawn. I pick it up, you can see I've used my rune tap. I've now popped my AMS. I'm going to wait a bit, and I'll start popping my Icebound. I like to delay it, you know. We had a bit of an awkward swap, because again, the other tank is on it, and at this point, I'm taking both Gorefiend and the ad. And I did dip a little bit low, but it's fine. I still had my Death Pact. It was A-okay. One thing, and I really recommend you do this if you don't run Purgatory, I like to basically use Purgatory as an extra cooldown. I sometimes purposely let it proc. So in that case, I didn't use the Death Pact because I had the Purgatory. That was the tether I was talking about. See how they run to him? He's now free, and it's chill. So yeah, it's a really, really straightforward fight. It's very overwhelming when you first get into it. And what I recommend you do is rewatch this video a couple of times, maybe even mute me, because it will just get a bit annoying. And if you just sort of watch the movement and see what people are doing. So this guy here, he had his Touch of Doom, he ran over to the edge of the room, did a bit of DPS, he now walks out. Healers are doing their own thing. Feast, first thing we do is we clean up the ads. Really straightforward, guys. Get the ads down. I'm aware that this is spawning here, so I get it, and I can just instantly run straight into the Wisp. Boom, no problem. And yeah, any pug you're in will get this down in about 2 to 3 feasts. 3 at the very worst. It's a bit of a slow group if it's on 3, but 2, no problem. If you've got any questions about this fight and other fights in general, and I will keep making these little guides for all the other fights, then just let me know down in the comments and I'll do my best to get back to you. I will be uploading some Hearthstone deck spotlight guides, and I'll also be uploading some Path of Exile beginner guides in the coming days. I'm Tarke Cat. Thanks for bearing with me with the very long break, by the way. I have been quite ill and it has been Christmas. See you again soon. Bye-bye.